Welcome again to the Flaming Goblin. This week we're going to be talking sort of briefly about the adventure that I ran last week. In the end, I called it the Touring Dungeon. It was created using the dungeon generator system from Advanced Fighting Fantasy, the Deluxe Edition, Advanced Fighting Fantasy Edition 2, Deluxe Edition, created by Graham Botley at Arian Games. Beautiful book, lovely, well written book. Covers everything you need to know. I think there are some additions to it which have sort of helped out with spells and herbs and bits and pieces, but the core of the book is there, plus a hell of a lot more. Using the Dungeon Creator, I created, it's quite a nice, sort of easy, simple system to use, which is good fun. I created a 10-room dungeon that sort of sprawled around a little bit. The idea was to run a dungeon idea, sort of room in, room corridor, etc., as it runs on sort of through, but with an overall theme of a circus or fairground. So that was kind of what I had in mind. It's useful to have sort of some kind of thought in mind. If you don't have to have a theme when you're creating a dungeon, but it makes it a bit more fun, a bit of difference to it. The characters last week, the adventurers first met up in a pub in Chalice, in the little town of Chalice. The pub, I think, was called the Torn Sock. I've seen that somewhere used before, and I don't know why, but I thought, yeah, we'll stick with that. We'll stick with the Torn Sock. They were the hook, as it were. They were sat in the pub. The landlord came across to the group, knowing that they were a group of adventurers. He'd been charged with looking after his nephew for the weekend, and unfortunately, while he was busy at the bar, his little nephew had run off in search of fame and fortune in the circus. It was touring the area. It was known that circuses toured the area and regularly came and parked up in the foothills of the Moonstone Hills to the north of Chalice. Anyway, the nephew had gone missing, so they were charged with searching for the nephew and bringing him back safe and sound. The group finished their drinks and the grub and headed out, bumping into Gerald the guardsman, who was wandering up and down the street. They had a little bit of a chat with him before heading off north and finding a circle of caravans in the foothills of the Moonstone Hills, which is where the caravan was based. In the centre of the caravans, in the clearing, there were sort of several fires around. It was dark, so there were several fires to sort of light the area, but they couldn't find anybody in the caravans or in the surrounding area. There was an archway that had been built in the middle of the clearing, with the words "Step Right Up" written on it, which they did. There was a trapdoor underneath the archway, which was sort of clearly lit as the entrance to the tunnel system, the dungeon system. And there was some discussion whether or not they should check the area a bit longer and search the area, at which point a boulder beast came clambering out from amongst the rocks and took a liking to them and started wandering towards the group. Peregrine quickly fired off a shot at the boulder beast, which was just enough to distract it long enough for them to jump down into the tunnel system. Stepping down into the tunnels, they were, well, hopefully surprised to find that it wasn't sort of standard stony, cold corridors. It was well-lit corridors with paint, different colours of paint splashed all over the walls, to make it sort of bright and cheerful looking, although slightly creepy. There was a voice calling out, almost like over a tannoy system, just sort of this headless voice that they could hear calling throughout the dungeon system as they moved through it, saying things along the lines of "Step right up, come and join the adventure." Bumped into a jester, first of all, who was just kind of waving at them, but when they shot at him, he disappeared into a cloud of smoke and just left his clothes behind. Then later on bumped into they came across a vending machine which was dispensing different types of potions, one of which was an orc ale that we've come across before, and the Flaming Goblin shop, which is always good fun, along with various sort of restoration potions for stamina, skill and luck. This was a random selection idea that I sort of generated and came up with. Another room they came into had Mac the Knife, a throwing knife expert who was throwing knives at a person strapped to a spinning wheel the other side of the room, again to sort of try and bring the circus and funfair idea alive. I dealt with him quite sneakily and managed to creep across the room. What else did we have? They came into a room of absolute darkness. They could hear nursery rhymes singing from outside, but when they entered the room it was this magical darkness, all-consuming, that filled the room. And there were rappers climbing all over the floor and up the walls, which attacked them. Yeah, they were quite difficult to get rid of, but they did manage in the end to beat the rappers. There were various jokes about Will Smith and Eminem as we fought our way through that room. And one of the corridors was a sloping corridor that slipped and disappeared in front of them, or dropped down in front of them as it were, and dropped them all down into a brightly coloured ball pit where there was wooden coloured painted balls bouncing all over the place, along with a few snakes to add to the fun of it. And after that they came to the Hall of Monsters. "Welcome to the Hall of Monsters and wondrous beasts," the creepy voice said as they entered this room. The first room, had an empty cage in it, which was slightly suspect. The creature had escaped. They later found this creature to be a cockatrice. Thankfully, they dealt with the cockatrice quite quickly and quite easily without being attacked. But yes, nasty bit of work if you come up against it and it all goes wrong. They've got quite sort of disastrous effects in the Out of the Pit, which the lovely 2d6 dice roll that you get for the cockatrice. If it manages to attack, you can get death with a roll of double 1 or a double 6, where it attacks the brain or the heart. It attacks the arms or legs and you lose the ability to use your arms and legs during the fight. There's also various skill issues where you lose 2 points if they can attack you on the leg, and that kind of. Moving on to the next room, they came across a sleeping manticore. It was snoozing away in the corner, all fluffled up in his fur. Unfortunately, he was laying across the entrance to the next corridor. But there was a smaller tunnel leading off north, which they managed to escape through, just in the nick of time as a creepy voice called out to the sleeping manticore to wake up. Again, manticore's quite a lovely beast, with a sting in its tail, quite literally. Always worth a look, as kind of a big beast and something to fight. Heading north, they managed to avoid the third of the beasts in the hallway, and came face to face with two flying guardians who were decorated in brightly coloured and referred to as parrots for the adventure. They dispatched with those quite luckily, with a couple of critical hits, smashing one into the other. And then in front of them stood huge Yakman, the circus leader, the ringmaster as it were, who was this kind of minotaur character dressed as the greatest showman. Next to him stood a slightly smaller character dressed as a clown, who turned out to be the missing child. As they attacked the Minotaur and it fought back, they did manage to knock its stamina down, but it disappeared in a cloud of balloons and confetti, revealing a trapdoor above its head, which they then escaped through with the small child, returning him to his uncle at the pub. When they came back up out of the trapdoor, the caravans all disappeared and the clearing was back to how it would have been before the circus had arrived, as if nothing had ever happened. And that was that. I think they got drinks all round and a free stay at the pub. that was it was good fun to run. There were a few other bits and pieces in it as well. I think there were zombies dressed as clowns, and there were a couple of other rooms that I did create, but they didn't end up using. Which doesn't matter. You can always use these things again, and you never know. With the boss disappearing, it's quite likely that the circus will appear again later on, maybe as part of the Forest of Doom, or maybe part of another campaign as we run it in the future. This week we're supposed to be starting a advanced fighting fantasy variation of a Ravenloft adventure with the Curse of Strahd. So we're all looking forward to that. Quite a sort of gothic sound to that. Again, it'll be something a bit different for us to use, and yeah, looking forward to that. I think that's going to be Wednesday evening this week, so we'll see what happens and hopefully get the podcast out after that to tell you guys more about it. If you've got any questions or anything you want to raise, please mention them on the Flaming Goblin page on Instagram. Please feel free to comment on there and follow us there. Thank you for listening to this week's chat. It's been quite nice to sort of talk about the adventure. I think the guys really enjoyed it. We had a bit of fun, and it sort of came up with some few fresh new ideas for us to use in the future. Thanks for listening.